Whether it's an alternate reality, distinct publishing line, or relaunch, the Man of Steel continues to be reconceived from his origin to his final fate. Over this 4-part event, we will journey from the Dark Knight universe to Earth-1, from the New 52 continuity to the Elseworld of Red Sun, as we explore whether the core of the character endures. This is Superman Reimagined. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss a selection of Elseworld stories, including the Dark Side and Red Sun, is returning guest, real-life Lobo cosplayer Justin De Voe. Welcome back, my friend.
I know you guys missed me. It's inevitable. What's up, man?
Listen, everybody, you've already seen it. You know the explicit tag is up for this episode. You know Justin is here. You know it's going to be flying in this episode.
Pause, because you needed to tag one on the last one, because for the first time ever, ladies and gentlemen, in the history, the F-bomb was dropped. So now you don't just have to blame me for the E. It was all you last time, but it was in a good spot because let's face it, it was totally warranted.
So you are referring to our recent episode on Superman Year One by Frank Miller. And yes, I did, in anger and frustration, drop an F-bomb in that episode. But I kind of follow the MPAA rules where a PG-13 movie gets one F-bomb.
Is allowed one.
So yeah. I feel like,
damn it,
in that sense, I was still okay without the tag. Although, in that exchange, I was talking to Bill, and right after I dropped mine, he dropped his. So that the episode did have more than one, but only one from me. So I feel like it was okay.
One in how many episodes of the 17,000 podcasts you do? I'd say that's pretty damn good, especially when dealing with stuff that didn't resonate with you or upset you as a Superman fan.
Yeah, again, the Frank Miller stuff was rough, but I appreciate that people seemed excited about the episode, even if they weren't excited about the Frank Miller works themselves. I take that as a huge compliment, So thank you. And so that was part of this event that we are now finishing here, Superman Reimagined. We've had this 4-episode swing looking at, again, these reimaginings, these reconceptions of the character of Superman. And we've done, again, the Millerverse, we've done Earth 1, we've done New 52, and now here we are for our little finale. So specifically what we read, again, Superman Red Sun, the 2003 3-issue miniseries written by Mark Miller, drawn by Dave Johnson and Killian Plunkett. We also have the 3-parter, The Dark Side, from 1998 by John Francis Moore and Kieran Dwyer. And then we had a pair of one-shots. So from 1993, the classic Elseworld story, Speeding Bullets, by J.M. DeMatteis and Eduardo Barreto. And from 1999, Superman Incorporated by Steve Vance and the legendary Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Now, not to start off on a negative note right from the beginning, but Superman Incorporated was so forgettable to me even before I read it. I can't tell you how many times in advance of this episode I was like, okay, I did everything I needed to do for this episode. Right. And then I was like, oh, damn it, I still didn't read Incorporated. Yeah. Multiple times this happened before I even read it. And then I read it, and unfortunately, I think the forgettable designation stays. This was the one where Clark grows up to become this
like an
athlete.
All sport. He was Bo Jackson post Bo Jackson. Like, he did everything. He won these awards. He hit 82 home runs, which when you think about it, like years later, like Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, they all ended up hitting that. So that's fairly terrestrial at this point. But I agreed where it was like, I get it. Like, it's a standalone story. And for what it is, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it was good to read once. And then I'm like, all right, I don't need to read it anymore. I did take some pretty interesting hue from it, but that, because you're an evil genius, played into just about everything else that we had to read, which I also thought was really cool.
Let me talk about Elseworlds for a moment here. So
I know that's your favorite kind of story.
So I've mentioned Elseworlds a bunch here and there, over the course of this podcast. And normally when I do, I have been a little bit facetious about it and a little flip in my descriptions. I think I've often said, I don't know what they really tell us about the character. It's like, oh, what if Superman were raised in the Soviet Union? Well, he'd be a communist. What if he were raised by Darkseid? Well, he would be one of Darkseid's soldiers. It's like, what does that really tell us? And yes, there is more to it than that. But the takeaway is that, I've never been really all that captivated by Elseworlds. I understand why creators are interested in doing those stories, and I understand why fans get excited. I do think that
Yeah, because it's a curveball.
Yeah, I do think that some of the scenarios are cool. I think a lot of times I don't often find that the execution, the total story really feels so worth it to me.
Right.
And I can draw a line, right? Because I've talked about Kingdom Come, right? And I love Kingdom Come. And I think for me, when we sort of start with quote unquote our Superman up to a certain point, and then something changes and we see what happens, and we have that divergence from the traditional story, but we're still starting with our Superman, I'm definitely more engaged by that. And Kingdom Come is a perfect example.
Holy shit, I wrote down the opposite, because all of these stories that we read for homework are all the opposite, and that's why I like them. I like when they start off with a different one and they end up coming back to the Superman that we know, because he's the incorruptible force. So, and we said it on the Injustice podcast. You said the same thing.
Right.
He's raised by Darkseid. He's going to be loyal to Darkseid, right? But then at the end of all of these books, there's a switch to wanting to help humanity. All of them, even the movie version, but like the animated version, which you have to watch those as two different things. They're both called Red Sun, but there's so many drastic differences between the two, especially with like Lex.
Yes.
Lex is completely fucking different in both. And leave it to Millar to like, again, a lot of his stuff I like. Like I like Super Crooks. I actually like I like Jupiter's Legacy. A lot of that stuff I like, but his label is also called Millar World. So there's a certain sense of like, I'm going to, do that in order to kind of get my point across. But I actually like the opposite. I like when it starts with a dark Superman. I don't even need to see him get that way. I don't. Because we all see how they fucked it up with Injustice, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it was totally unjustified. And one of your other guests, it might have been Scott or somebody, I don't know, but someone brought it up that like, it wasn't justified enough. Like if someone kills Lois, they'd be like, all right, well, I'm hurt. I might kill the Joker, but I'm not going to enslave the human race for it.
Yes, for sure. I think definitely with respect to Injustice and that animated adaptation in particular, the execution left a lot to be desired. But I guess going into it, I was definitely more primed to be open to it because it was, quote unquote, our Superman to a point. Now, you're right. All the ones that we read for this episode are the opposite, right? So Red Sun, Kal-El's rocket lands in the Soviet Union. In Speeding Bullets, Kal-El is found by Thomas and Martha Wayne. Superman Incorporated, he's found by this traveling salesman and then adopted by a couple, and then he, again, becomes this celebrity athlete. And in The Dark Side, his rocket is intercepted and lands on Apocalypse, and he's raised by Darkseid. So these are flipping the script from the jump. And the reason why I wanted to cover these is A, to challenge myself, and B, to sort of try to address this question of, if you are changing the character from the point of that rocket landing, what still does remain the same? So what can we kind of point to as the ultimate core of the character that will shine through regardless of who he's raised by? Now, and you'll love this. That being said,
yes, I was waiting for it.
Justin has pinpointed that's my tell when I'm going to express a negative opinion. I start with that being said. So I smile every time I say that on the show. Even if I don't address it verbally, I'm smiling to myself as I say it. But in all of these stories, and we'll talk about them, but I think one theme that emerges is the effect that the people around him have in getting him to sort of see the light. Where again, it falls a little short for me is that, and I know, I think I'm being a little harsh here, but that's still not really telling me anything I don't already know. Like I'm going to quote Smallville as I do all the time.
Right.
And from the series finale, when Jor-El says to Clark, your abilities may be of my blood, but it was your time in Smallville with Jonathan and Martha Kent and all the people there that made you a hero. It's the time in Smallville that makes him this hero. It's Lois. It's the other people around him that, I guess that keep him that way and sustain him. So again, I feel like we already know that. So I enjoy, for the most part, I enjoyed these stories, but I think just from a fundamental level, I think that's the problem that I kind of have with Elseworlds and with these kinds of Elseworld stories.
See, that's so weird because in my opinion, it was no matter where you find Superman, no matter what situation he grew up in or what hurdles that he jumped over the course of his life, he's always going to be a protector of the people. You put him in the worst place possible, He got trained. He kicked the shit out of Calabac. He's like, I'm going to lead everybody. And in the end, he goes to Earth, feels bad for them, and ends up like gaining the trust of the people that he tried to kill with the Omega bomb and stuff like that. And then he's like, fuck it, I got to protect it. And then lives happily ever after. Like, to me, I don't want him to change at the end because that would negatively affect my outlook on the character. I like the fact that you can put him in any situation and he's always going to have this change of heart, even without defense side talks with his dad, right? Like, he's always going to be that. Now, the fence side talks, I believe, help him in current continuity, but he just gets that from people. So I think when you don't change that, that kind of always makes me go, yeah, because he's fucking Superman. Like, he's always going to be that guy.
So the thing is, I get that. Like, I do get that perspective, and I wouldn't try to convince you otherwise. But yeah, right. I think for me, and we talked about this on our recent episode when we covered For All Seasons when we did our Tim Sale tribute, and it's, for me, it does always go back to Smallville and that time on the farm and the influence of the Kents, and it's like, and I know I've said this so many times on the show, but this impossible question of like, who could possibly have this power and use it selflessly? And it's Superman, but it's Clark, right? It's the Clark that was raised on that farm. That's the key to unlocking that question. And Lois similarly is a key in terms of keeping him grounded and in touch with his humanity. Batman is a key as well. I think this question that we've gotten at a lot, especially when we talk about Lex Luthor, right? Like, someone who has this power, how could you possibly leave that person unchecked? Right? Quoting one of the stories that we discussed, it's like, even if you believe him that he won't abuse his power, how can you accept that? How can you trust that? I think Batman is the key. The fact, like, Superman trusts him with that kryptonite ring. If anything ever went awry, Batman, so that unlocks. So I feel like those fundamental pieces of the story and those people and the roles that they play are the keys to like unlocking and understanding the character.
Right.
So when you sort of twist it and take it away, and especially take away the upbringing with the Kents, again, I totally get what you're saying. And I think there is something, very fundamental and elemental that is appealing about that, right? Like this core, whether it's just the spirit that's within him, whether it's the influence of his birth parents. I mean, that could be an argument. Yeah. The fact that heroism can still come through, can still shine through, despite the worst of circumstances. There is something about that. I think I can't get totally on board, but I get it. I do get it.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I enjoy. I think I enjoy him as we know him, though, where he gets that from his birth parent. From Jonathan and Martha, like, I like that more. Right. So it's not always in him. I do like that about the stories, but when you guys were talking about like his talks, but when you rallied against Mr. Oz, which was hilarious, by the way, I was like, yeah, I know Anthony's not going to like that shit. Because like, what the fuck kind of upheaval was that? But anyway, and there's also stuff that Clark does that we don't see even in Thought Bubble that still protects people, because every once in a while that gets dropped. For instance, in the last episode I just listened to, your guest talk about like, why is Plastic Man there, right? He's kind of like the in one of the animated versions, I think of the Frank Miller.
Oh yeah.
And he's been quoted before. I gotta find the fucking panel because I remember it, where they asked him the same thing, and Superman's like, because he's the most dangerous person here. He's completely indestructible. Like, he can wrap around somebody and like take all the air out of their lungs. So he keeps them around to watch them. Now, he didn't warn anybody else. It's not like he's going around putting up flyers and shit like that, but like, he knows to protect all people at all times. And it's just like, God damn, that's got to be a headache. And that's why I like when sometimes he's like, I'm going to go hang out with a polar bear. Like, I can't do all of it. Like I need a break. Like in the book Red Son, like, he's not listening to stuff that's going on because he's making a statue. Like, it's just what he wants. He just wants to fucking make a statue. And it's just like, I like those little moments where he turns off because he knows he can't, but if he doesn't, I guess you get one of these, Elseworlds stories where he's like, well, fuck everybody.
Yeah. So on the note of these Elseworld stories, I'm sure we'll spend most of our time on Red Sun. It's
Yeah.
one of the most classic Elseworld stories. Again, it did have a relatively recent animated adaptation. This is one of the ones that I think you'll always find on comic shop shelves and will always be recommended. And I get why. I don't take issue with that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Speeding Bullets first.
Okay.
Actually, if we're going chronologically, that is the oldest one. So
right.
Again, this is a story where Kal-El is found by Thomas and Martha Wayne. And, the story, still follows the traditional, the moment of the killing of the Waynes and Clark ultimately becomes Batman. But he's a child who, a very childlike adult who still hasn't processed his trauma. When he becomes
his powers. Yeah.
He has repressed his powers. Which actually between, that and Superman Incorporated, they had that in common too. The fact that he had used his powers briefly as a child and then
blocked it out.
And then blocked it out, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, when he becomes Batman, right, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of violence, and it's ultimately Lois's influence, right, where he's going to kill Lex/Joker, where she's able to get through to him, and they'd had this conversation about how the Batman should be using his abilities to inspire and not punish. And, he ultimately sees the light and he's in a version of the Superman costume by the end of the story.
I actually took a picture of that when I was reading it because it was such a good part. When she's like Batman might not, but Bruce Wayne does. And they have like this really, really nice moment where, again, it ties back to like, she's always his anchor, right? Yeah. Like her or his family or whatever, like, they're like the cosmic couple that's always going to meet. And she can always do the thing where she talks them down.
Yeah. So what did you think of Speeding Bullets? Did you enjoy it?
So here's my issue with Speeding Bullets, right? There wasn't enough Superman to be Superman, but there was too much Batman. Like, does that make sense? Like, he gets there, his name's already Bruce Wayne. He kind of handles things the same way. He has no investment in his company, no nothing like that. Ends up doing the vigilante thing after they break into his house. He's like, well, fuck that. Like, this can't happen. He's angry and violent, just like Batman. And then at the end, he's like, yo, I found my wings or whatever. And he ends up in a Superman suit. But I didn't. And I liked that story. Like, I really did. But I didn't like it because it was a Superman becoming Batman story. It was almost like a Batman and Superman side by side. I don't know. Like, it's weird to explain. Like, I liked it, but it was like all Batman. It was all Bruce Wayne the whole fucking time until that last part where he kind of shows he's Superman and they're like roll credits. Like, it just wasn't enough of the dichotomy between the two for me.
I totally get what you're saying, because I think that was the issue that I had with it as well, where when the Waynes are murdered, young Bruce does use his heat vision in this outburst and kills the mugger, and then blocks out that memory and suppresses his powers until he's an adult and he has this awakening, and then he re-enters public life and he dons this Batman persona. So it's not that the powers don't matter at all, but it's really pretty tangential. Those are definitely a couple of key moments, but for the rest of the story, the fact that he's Kal-El from Krypton really doesn't matter all that much.
That's what I mean, right? Like, there's no, like, he's got superpower. That's it. Like, it makes no difference who the fuck he was before, because he's just Bruce Wayne. It's Superman as Bruce Wayne, where if you put them at a costume, especially in the art, it's the same fucking guy.
Right. And I guess the other thing too is that the emotional arc, I feel like, is the same whether it's Clark or Bruce, right? Their parents are murdered. There's all this anger. They're taking it out on people, and they need to find a better way. Like, that was literally just the Batman movie that we saw, right? Where
he's
so brutal, and then like he comes to find by the end of it, it's like, oh, I can inspire something in people. I mean,
right.
So you could tell the story with either one. This is, I think, the biggest problem I had with it, and I love DeMatteis as a writer, but look, in fairness, like, it was his story to tell, not mine. But as I'm reading those opening pages, and we're reading what we find out ultimately is Lois's narration about Bruce's upbringing. But there's all of this about how Thomas really was nurturing Bruce's mind, right, as he was growing up, and Martha
Right.
was, cultivating his spirit and his kindness and everything. And I say to myself, like, if you have the opportunity to tell the story of Kal-El raised by the Waynes, there's so many interesting questions, right? Like, Thomas is this brilliant surgeon.
Yeah.
Might he inspire / teach his son such that when this Bruce grows up, he's using his X-ray vision and his heat vision to perform surgeries and save people in that way? Like, there's so many, like, that's not to get too fired up here, but like, that's what kind of bothered me about this. It's like, there's a world of difference between being raised by these, very, down to earth, simple farmers,
Down home, corn fed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus, the upper echelon of society and science and wealth in Gotham City. And I don't feel like that really played out in any meaningful way. And this is, I guess, somewhat of maybe a little bit of the flip of what you were saying, but I think gets at the same problem where Bruce in this story, he buys the Gotham Gazette and he brings in Perry White and Lois Lane.
Yeah.
So it's like this, it's like basically just close. Bruce Wayne, but then it's throwing in the Superman cast. Like, I don't know. It didn't totally work for me.
And then I think he should have stayed in more of a Batman costume, because he's got a quote in it that means, like, you should have amalgamated the two costumes, because it's like a standalone. I think it was on the back because it talked about one of the quotes. And he's like, he says, "Can you see them? Can you see my brothers? No, of course you can't, but I can. I can see things, hear things no one else can. I can spread my wings and fly through the shadows of the night. I know myself at last." So why would he change his outfit? Right? Like, if that was such a prolific moment for him, that he's like, I can hear them, they can hear me, no one else can hear him, I finally found my wings, and he's comfortable with like flying and stuff, why the fuck would he go back into a Superman outfit? Like, at the end, like, at least make it a Bat Superman outfit. Like, it wasn't like he had the little thing or whatever, but like, it wasn't, he just turned back into fucking Superman. Now, I just said I like when we get our Superman at the end, but I like the personality going back. They literally just took fucking Bruce Wayne the entire time. I was like, fuck it, throw him in a Superman costume. And that was the end. And it was just like, but like you said, there was so much more that they could have did in terms of putting the two together. And it seemed, I don't want to call it lazy writing, but it seems like, all right, we're just going to make him Bruce Wayne. We'll make Lex the Joker for the first, 30 pages. And in the last two, he's Superman. And people are going to love that, because Elseworlds at the time was the shit. Like, everyone wanted to read that. Amalgam Comics, like, they all wanted to read that stuff. What if? So it was just like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was good, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it or read it again. I would bring it up in conversation when someone's like, oh, should I read it? I'm like, I just told you the whole fucking thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not good enough for someone to read it, but it is good enough for someone to tell you about it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I don't know. I've always gotten the sense that this was generally remembered well by fans. So I definitely went into it with higher hopes. I was like, oh, because I've never read this. I hadn't said this before, but of the stories we read, I guess I had read The Dark Side when it came out, but I mean, that was so long ago. And actually the same thing with Red Sun. Red Sun weirdly falls into the same category as Kingdom Come for me. Both these iconic Elseworld stories, over 20 or almost 20 years old in the case of Red Sun at this point, where I read them right around the time that they came out. In both cases, I didn't read the single issues as they were coming out, but then I read the trades immediately thereafter. Enjoyed both stories.
Right.
They're always referenced. Yet for some reason, I had never gone back to them. I couldn't really tell you why. And it doesn't have to do with my general aversion to Elseworlds. Because again, those two definitely made an impression, and a positive one. But for whatever reason, it was just like with Kingdom Come. But anyway, is there anything else about Speeding Bullets that you wanted to say before we jump to a quick commercial break?
And again, I liked it. I liked it. But before someone, I guess I would recommend it, but I'd be like, listen, he's pretty much Bruce Wayne through the whole time, but there's some key points with him and Lois, and there's beautiful quotes in it. You can read it for that. But otherwise, there's not much substance to the story to make you be like, I got to read it because the story's good. It's like we said, he's Bruce Wayne for 30 pages and then Superman for 2, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was Speeding Bullets. We'll take a quick commercial break, and then we'll dive into the other 3 stories. We'll be right back. Acme Comics is a locally owned and operated full-service comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina, for people of all ages and walks of life. Since 1983, this 9-time Eisner Award nominee uses their collective knowledge and resources to connect you with the best material available. They pride themselves on their significant contemporary and vintage back issue selection. Mail order subscriptions to new releases are available, and all offerings are available to anyone, anywhere, via mail order. Follow Acme on social media and eBay, listen to the Acme Cast on all podcast services, and visit acmecomics.com for much more. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. I was fortunate enough to have my work shown at these festivals, and I found them to be very enjoyable and well-run events. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news and updates about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and currently under new ownership, Moose sells a wide selection of new and old comics from every publisher, action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Flat Squirrel Productions is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP, that's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions, to save 10% on your order, and it helps support the show. Thank you. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations: Harrison, New York, which happens to be my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Aw Yeah. And we're back. Hey, while we are doing some plugs, can you tell people about this new podcast that you're on, the Not So Secret Dad's Business?
Yeah, it's just dads talking shit, and a lot of times it's about just like men stuff or stuff that like men have to go through, like health problems, and there's a lot of tangents, and it is F-bomb galore, and there's some but it's more casual. Like for this, I have notes, and like I'm looking at them because you demand, not in a bad way, you and your fans and your guests are like, I have 42 pages worth of homework. And I was like, I can't go on and just be like dick and pussy and shit. Like, I can't do that, because there actually needs to be substance, but it's fun. It's on podcasts and Spotify and shit like that. So, I mean, if you want, check it out.
Yeah, I do hope people check out your podcast. So coming back now to these Elseworlds stories that we read, I guess let's keep going chronologically, because the dark side is very interesting. Again, I read this at the time. I thought it was a cool idea. Rereading it, I felt like it held up fairly well. I am most grateful for it, more than anything, for seemingly inspiring the 2-part series finale of Superman the Animated Series, Legacy, right, where Superman is captured and brainwashed by Darkseid and sent to Earth, leading this invading force. Right. And I mean, it really sets up a very bittersweet, dramatic conclusion to the series, even though that wasn't intended to be the end of the series. But where, Superman has lost the trust of a lot of the people. And it was a really powerful note to go out on. Now, those episodes, like, that's the sweet spot for me, because it's not, we're just, coming up with this Elseworld story. Like, that was in the context of that character and that story. He's been brainwashed. He's been made to think that he landed on Apokolips and grew up there, but that's not the case, and he has to find his way back. So for me, like, that's the ideal version of that story. But again, it really preserves a lot of those same, a lot of the same beats and the look. That is probably my favorite thing from that. I love the Apokolips armor look for Superman in that story.
That ends up weighing him down when he lands, which I was like, holy shit, right? Because like, you know, different atmospheres, different weights and stuff like that. I was like, he was fucked. He was like, I gotta take this shit off or I'm gonna drown. You know what I'm saying? So I thought that was really cool. And I like different looks. Like, for instance, right now, I know that you're not a huge Disney guy, but so Disney Mirrorverse, and believe me, this is going somewhere. So Disney Mirrorverse is essentially like another, like a multiversal thing where all your Disney heroes are actually warriors and they got to fight these fractured things or whatever. I like different looks to people. Like, I'm okay with costume changes because I like different, like, you know, if you turn Sully into like a shield bearing warrior and like, fuck it. Like, I like that stuff because there's always stuff from the original character that remains. So I do like when they like screw with that stuff because I think it's just interesting where an artist gets to be like, okay, I got to take this and take that and come up with something. So I do like those little costume changes. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, the look was really cool. I liked it a lot. I mean, what did you think about the story generally? What stood out to you about it?
Can we just say that Bibbo is just every man? I fucking love that guy, dude. I have a standalone Bibbo and Lobo comic, and even Lobo likes that guy. Like that Popeye looking motherfucker. Like, everybody likes that dude. I did like it. I like he shows up and he's like, I'm going to kick the shit out of Calabac. And now everything is like, he goes right into being that guy. Like, he didn't even think about it. And then he lands on, and of course and then, you know, he runs into Lois. He has this moment with people. I did like how at the end, all hope was lost until Orion shows up and then was like, holy shit, they're going to win. And then Darkseid beats the shit out of both of them. And it turns out that there's a sacrifice that he needs and stuff like that. And then he creates this utopia on Apocalypse, right? Like, am I remembering that right?
Yeah, it ends with him. Yeah. And it ends with him and Barda on Apocalypse planting. Yeah. Like, he becomes a farmer. That was a very fitting end for this version of the character.
And so something like that. And again, because I like the turn where you can always trust him, even though people don't, because like you said, he's got this amazing power where he can do anything and he decides to use it to help people. And that to me is like, man, I wish that shit was real. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wish that you can have faith in someone that much who has all that power. Instead, the power people that we have are usually scumbags. And it's just like, oh man, like, this guy's a really good guy. And then you find out he's on a fucking island with like underage kids. And you're like, come on, man. Like, is anybody good anymore? It's crazy. But I love Superman stories because dude always makes me smile, right? Like, he's always, that's truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Like, that's him all day, every day. And that's why I guess a lot of people are like, that's boring, right? Like, that shit, like, I don't like that stuff. Give me some Elseworlds stuff, which Morrison was actually quoted for saying he doesn't like when they make they don't like when they make the Superman trope where it's like, well, just turn him evil. He's like, that's easy. They're like, fuck. They're like, that's easy. And I'm like, they're not wrong. Now, different incarnations I like. I love Homelander because he's got something else going on. He is a Superman archetype, but he's crazy, right? He's got all this shit going on. He's very different in the book than he is in the show. I love Plutonian and Irredeemable. I love that. Nice little twist at the end of that series too. So I just like that. Like, if I feel down, like, I could I could go and pick any Superman book and just be like, dude, like, I'm relaxed now. And I think that's the greatest gift that Superman gives to people in general.
Agreed. Well, to answer the question that you posed a minute ago, I'll quote Batman v Superman and Bruce Wayne at the end of that movie. Men are still good.
Which we also kind of see in Red Sun, but we'll get there when we start talking about Red Sun.
Yeah, but no, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. I'm with you. I don't really have an issue with the analogs, the Homelanders, the Plutonians, or whatever it is. That's, I'm on board with those. Yeah. And I think, because I think I know that interview you were talking about, and I think, maybe Morrison was talking about those versions too, but I think in particular, like, they were talking about when Superman himself goes bad. And I agree. Those are the stories.
It's all the time. Yeah.
Like,
it's overused.
Yeah. And also, again, like we've talked about so much on the show, a driving theme is that one of the things, but the core thing that makes this character so unique and interesting is that he has this power and uses it for good. So if you break him, right, and just have him use that power selfishly or in an evil way.
Right.
It just takes away, the most fundamental aspect. And, again, even in a story like, like Injustice, where they give you, I think if there's anything that's going to set him off, it would probably be the death of Lois and their unborn child. But even there, we did a whole episode on that. Like that was rough.
And that's why I'm behind Morrison in that aspect, because they're right. Like, it's such an easy thing to be like, fucking make Superman evil and watch what happens. Like, they're just sick of it at this point. And it was a great quote. It was like, I think it's easy. I think it's a really good cop out for people just to push a Superman book. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
He's not. It's like saying, like, now the big thing is the multiverse, right? But now you can play with that stuff. So it's not an evil Superman as much as, hey, that Superman's either a la Earth 2, right? Where it's Ultraman, which is weird because it's Superwoman and she's, so like, I don't know which one is supposed to be which, but who gives a shit? If it's a completely different one, I don't expect him to be good because he's over there. Like, it's not an Elseworlds state. Like, there's another world that's over there, and on that one, he's this, and on that one, he's that, and on that one, he's that. I like that. I don't have a problem with that. But I just don't like, and Injustice, I dug. But after talking to you and after listening to shows and seeing Morrison's quote, I'm like, I guess, yeah. I mean, like, how many more times can you tell, Superman's mad and he's going to level the world? He wouldn't even do that. I think after Lois's death, he'll probably kill the Joker, which we've been over. He'll kill the Joker and then fly to and fly to the Fortress of Solitude to hang out for a year. Like, he would just leave and be like, I can't be around people right now because I don't like people.
Right.
Which is like, all right.
Going back to the dark side, I guess what I was tracking most in reading the story was what is bringing this version of the character over to the side of good, right? And I think you get a few, because he starts off as the soldier of Darkseid. He's in the arena, like you said, killing Kalibak in front of everyone with no hesitation, no remorse. He essentially annihilates the planet of New Genesis. And Highfather is able to send a bunch of those new gods to Earth, to safety. Yeah. But, Superman is ultimately responsible for the destruction of a planet.
Yeah,
and
like their home.
Yeah, and then, at the end of that first issue and moving forward, we get now these few pieces that are going to sort of turn him. So Highfather has this moment with him where, because the Kal-El has been, made to think that he was born on Apokolips. He's a son of Darkseid. Right. And Highfather shows him, no, this is where you came from. This is where you were headed. You were diverted. And I think that's...
Like, intercepted. Like, intercept. Like, it wasn't even like, oh, shit, we crashed into each other. Like, they yanked that motherfucker right out of the sky.
I do.
And it was just...
And I like that bit with this Elseworlds story. Not that it really makes much of a difference, but it's not, in Speeding Bullets, he just happens to land in Gotham. Here, it's
and
like,
Red
no,
Sun,
he was
happens to let.
Yeah. But here it's like, no, there was actually this force, it's kind of, anyway, like you could have told this story in the regular comics through time travel, and then you would have had to undo it. But anyway, so he has this moment with Highfather, and I think that starts to get the wheels turning. And then he has, like you were saying, this adventure on Earth. And again, the effect of people. Right, Lois saves him. He lands in the river, and she pulls him out. He then has this opportunity to defend her from intergang. She's investigating them.
Yep.
You mentioned Bibbo and Jimmy. Right, there's this whole bit where there's this burning building, and they're going in to help people. Like their example seems to elicit something in Superman. Then eventually, of course, it gets we find out that this part was particularly interesting to me. That apparently the Kryptonians had the anti-life equation and that they hid it within Superman's genetic codes, which that was the piece of it that I don't know what to make of it, because if we're saying that there's this innate core that perhaps at least in part comes from his birth parents that accounts for the heroism, well, how do we reconcile that with the fact that they, I guess we don't know. Like, we don't know their intentions with the anti-life equation. Were they protecting it? Were they trying to keep it away from people who would misuse it? Were they hoping that their baby would use it wherever he ended up? I don't know. Yeah,
but like they just got lucky that he had a change of heart,
right?
Because if he had it and he got intercepted, probably reason why, right? That he ends up there. It's like, we got to take this shit out of this dude. The game would have been completely different if you would have did it there. Right? Like, if you would have did it there, you had a completely different story. Shit would have been over in 5 pages. But like, why do that unless you want to send it to Earth to make it disappear? And like, oh, well, he'll just hide amongst the people. because they didn't know. Well, I mean, I guess in different incarnations, they're like, you're going to be awesome there because of the yellow sun. So like, yeah, well, when he gets there, he can protect himself from just about, fucking everything. So why not? It kind of has the hues of the Snyder cut of Justice League, where it was like, it's always been there. But again, Superman is there now. So it's like, well, we can protect it now. So it's, I think it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of like Maxwell Lord / Dreamstone, right? Like one is him and the other one is kind of just walking around. I kind of like that though, that it's in him. Like, I think that's pretty cool.
Well, you mentioned the Snyder movies. I mean, the idea, in Man of Steel, we got this idea that the Kryptonian Codex, right, is embedded within him. So a similar thing here with it's the anti-life equation instead. And so of course, when Darkseid realizes this, then he tortures, Superman to extract this from him.
Yeah.
And, by this point in the story now, Superman is, trying to stop Darkseid, and ultimately does, like you said, he fights alongside the gods of New Genesis, and yes, Light Ray has to make the sacrifice, but is able to share his power with Superman, and that's enough for Superman to defeat Darkseid. Which I kind of like that it wasn't just Superman, right? Because he it's his book, so of course he's always gonna win the day and shit. But in this situation, it's like you needed help. Like, Darkseid is that much of a motherfucker that you needed help. And even though Orion turned the tide initially when he got there, Darkseid just steps off and he's like, all right, now we're going to fight. And it did not go well. So it was just he couldn't do it on his own, which kind of plays into the fact that maybe he didn't know he could, right? You spend that much time on Apocalypse. There might've been a hesitation about I can't do it. Right. Or I've seen him in action so much that even if Superman was stronger, he's seen this dude do horrible shit. And it's just I can't take on that dude. So maybe it was a little bit of that, and I don't know how hard I hit or can hit kind of thing. So I kind of like that he needed help because he would take it. He's not one of them guys that's no, I'll do it on my own. And if he does, he's usually talked out of it pretty quickly. It's no, dude, we all got to do this because you're not going to be able to do it. And he's always well, I don't want to put anybody in danger. And the response is always we want to go. You can't stop us from going. And he's never well, I'm going to, speed off and shit, and I'm going to lock you guys in. He's always all right, we'll fucking come then. Yeah. I think that, again, overall, I enjoy this. I think the concept of this is really cool. And like I said, I think what the animated series did is the ultimate realization of the potential of the story. I guess the question I have is, yes, he has this moment with Highfather. He has these moments with Lois and Jimmy and Bibbo. I'm skeptical that would be enough to turn him, given the upbringing that he supposedly had. And,
unless, okay, no, okay.
No, and I guess that's the other thing where, not to rewrite the story, but much like with Speeding Bullets, I felt like there was a missed opportunity here where we don't get to see any of this tutelage under Darkseid. I mean, you can imagine how horrific it would be.
Brutal, yeah, of course.
And I feel like it would have been interesting to see a little bit more of that. But even without seeing it, I think we can imagine what it would be like. And so to be essentially brainwashed for that amount of time. See, I
don't know. Is it brainwashing though? If we know, and we've said in the past that wherever Superman goes, he's going to give his all for that place. Maybe because he's just inherently like that. I don't know if it's brain. I don't think you can consider that brainwashing. A la he lands in Russia, becomes a Marxist, becomes a communist and stuff like that. Tries to level the playing field with the world. I don't know if that's brainwashing. I think it's just fuck it, he's ours now. Let's raise him this way. I think the brainwashing is almost opposite, where you can do that, but as soon as you put him around people that he feels like he needs to protect, he's going to snap out of that.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, all right, I'll walk back the brainwashing. Indoctrinated, though, at
least. Definitely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, especially if, see, now your point makes sense. Especially if it was that quick, a couple situations or whatever, that quick to be no, I need to protect this place. I want to say that it's because it's his nature throughout every comic, right? It's just his nature. It's the way it is. But that's a lot of Winter Soldier-esque, Manchurian Candidate shit that was going on. And it's just unless he's just embedded to be a good person, maybe that's what he, maybe in this situation, that's all he needed was to see holy shit, these people are like ants. Like, this is crazy. Like, if I don't protect them, like, maybe it was like, your classic turn. I think if you made it into a series, it would have made a little more, because I would have liked to see the training, right? Especially because I want to see how bad it got. And then I want to see a little bit more of why, like, he made the turn, outside of being like, fucking Bibbo's the coolest and shit like that. I don't know. Maybe, I definitely would have liked to see more.
You know what? I was talking about this idea of, keys earlier. Maybe Bibbo is the key here. Bibbo is awesome. So maybe just seeing
He seems
Bibbo...
to be the key for fucking everybody. Like, that dude is like, he represents, I think, good comic book readers. Like, we're not heroes, but like we would be, because we're so inspired by what we see. Dude owns a bar. He's like gruff and shit like that. Like, they made him, come on, man. They made him look exactly like Popeye. And it's just like, but he's always fair, right? And he's always a hero, even when he doesn't need to be. And I kind of like that. Like, he's what I hope I would be if there was caped superheroes flying around. Like, I wouldn't let him do anything for me. I would still, protect people, even if I knew they weren't there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's the, I think the ultimate everyman. I mean, that's the thing. Cause when you look at the Metropolis supporting cast, I mean, like Lois and I'll even throw in Jimmy there, but they're heroes in their own right in different ways. But, Bibbo is really the common man on the street, and he is inspired as well. So, moved to action by what he sees from Superman.
Yeah. And it's funny because we had the whole conversation about how Lois is a hero. She puts herself in shit, and she's not always sure that Superman's going to come get her. Like, remember when we went over the animated series that Lobo was in, and it was Parasite?
Yeah,
dude, she was like 5 feet away taking pictures of him. Like, he can feel that, right? She just doesn't care. Like, she's got a job to do.
For sure.
And that's why I like the animated version of Red Sun a little bit more, I think. But again, like, we'll get to that. Yeah, but I like that. I did. I think out of the 3 homework assignments, I think that one was probably my favorite one. Because again, Speeding Bullets was awesome. Batman, fucking Superman Incorporated was, at best, like, oh shit, I found it in my stack. I'm going to read it. All right. So he would be a sports star. Like, of course he'd be a fucking sports star.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to that.
Kind of a prick.
Yeah. Well, let me just say the last thing about the dark side is, and I don't mean to keep harping on the animated series, but because I rewatched the scene from Legacy, from Superman the animated series, where Clark snaps out of it, where he's leading this assault against Earth, and then Lois intercepts him, and she's like, "Hey," and it snaps him out of it. Now, and that was an instance where he was literally brainwashed, right? He was reprogrammed and made to think he had lived on Apokolips. But the emotional connection, the history with Lois was there, and that was enough to snap him out of it. In the dark side, again, it's not a matter of snapping out of brainwashing, but he has this change of heart. And as much as I think we have to pin a lot on the influence of these people he meets on Earth, there's no backstory, there's no history, there's no emotional connection there. So I feel like, again, it was a big leap to make. But again, your point is well taken. And if our starting point is that, there's this core, I mean, maybe that is the answer, right? Like, there's this innate core within him that is going to devote himself to the place and to helping. And I don't know, it's like once he arrives on Earth, he's in this different environment, and maybe that's in part what helps to awaken this. And,
yes. Allow me to give you a real life example. I teach in Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey, no fucking place to play. Still, was worse. Now, like, people are getting shot pretty frequently now, which is worrying the mayor quite a bit. I have some students that are rough and tumble, right? Like, one of my old students, who is now a good friend of mine, was a drug lookout when he was 9. It's like carjacking people with a gun at like 11 or 12, right? Product of his environment, but would also protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's an innate thing, dude. Like, I don't think you need to be taught how to be kind. I think your barometer goes off and you're just like, something about that ain't right. And it's the weird snap, right? Like, he thought, I'm going to do all these things. And he even said, I did it because of the people around me. Like, I wanted to catch some stains, so I did it for the people around me. But it didn't matter what his situation was like. Dude always had a golden heart. So I think that shows up regardless of what your grown up situation is.
I appreciate you sharing that. And not only does that make sense, but I think that almost has to be the case in these stories, and especially in the dark side, because again, I think this is where I feel a little frustrated with it. It's like, well, it feels like this, this light switch that just gets flipped when he gets to Earth.
Right.
Because he doesn't have the history with these people. And given what his upbringing was, it doesn't seem like that would be enough. But
it would be the case, right?
But if you have what you just described, I think that does help account for it. And I think you have to have that. Otherwise, I don't know. I feel like it is a lesser story then, right? But if you're starting from that core. So, no, I mean, I get that. Again, does it make me the ultimate Elseworlds fan? Not necessarily, but...
No, but at least that's something that even if it's implied, you could be like, okay. Like, regardless of where he is, he's always going to have a good spot. Right. And regardless of who raised him, the worst place, right? He could still turn it around and be like, yeah, but something in me tells me that none of this shit is right.
I also wonder, especially for people who really like Elseworlds and these kinds of Elseworld stories in particular, I do think there's an argument to be made. It's one thing when he ends up a good person coming out of the Kent farm. It's like, well, you would hope that he would, being raised by those people.
Right.
But if you're still able to make a good choice in the end, coming from horrible circumstances, there is something very inspirational and aspirational about that. So I'm coming around.
I like, the fence post talks with Pa. I do. But I think he just likes to have, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe he just likes to have those. Maybe it's like therapy for him, right? He's got to talk to somebody. And, and that's where he goes, explains the situation. And Pa gives him some very down home, well, this is, who you are. And it's never this is nowhere. It's weird. I don't think I ever remember reading, this is who we raised you to be. But I have heard him say or read him say, well, this is who you are. This is what you're here to do. And I think that adds to the humility and the humbleness of Ma and Pa. Where it's never we raised you to be better. I'm sure it was said at some point. I haven't read all Superman comics. I'm sure it's been said at some point. But I know repeatedly I have seen him say, you're this person. This is who you are. And I think they knew that. Especially if you look at the origin, where it's he could have been snapping fingers and necks and shit like that. A la the movie with the kid with the red bag on his head. Again, right, the evil fucking Superman kid.
Brightburn?
Brightburn, yeah. He could have, he didn't. And even as a kid, as a tween, when kids are their meanest, right? Just never was that person. Never was that person.
Well, you make a compelling case here, because I think that is valid, that the Kents are ultimately bringing out what's there. I mean, I think they are instilling values in him, but
yeah, of course.
But they are. Yeah, it's not like he's just, I don't know, not that there's necessarily this darkness that they're trying to cure him of, or that they're beating him over the head with anything. I do think, ultimately they are trying to bring out the best version of him. And so in these other stories, and I mean, look, in fairness, in the dark side, it's not like he lands on Earth and he's instantly flying around saving people.
I love these people. It's not how it went. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I appreciate your take on this. I'm always, anytime I can sort of come at it from a different angle, and I think my perspective on this has shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
And I do now have, I think, more of an appreciation for these kinds of stories, and I do get why they resonate with people. Now, I don't have much to say about Superman Incorporated.
Yeah.
Once again, and I guess this is becoming a pattern here in this episode, but I feel like I'll rewrite it a little bit. I feel like this would have been such an more interesting story if he had been raised by the traveling salesman who found him.
Yeah.
That's, what's funny, because
that was only put in as a plot mechanic later for them to find the spaceship. That's it.
Right. Now, what's so funny to me is when I read the description, and I think the description mentions being found by a salesman, or maybe I had just read the first couple of pages. I don't know. But between the opening pages and the description, this idea that he becomes this businessman, athlete, celebrity, is found by a traveling salesman, I assumed going into this, the traveling salesman, he's down on his luck. He finds this kid. This kid becomes his ticket.
Nope. He ends up hitting with a car.
It's again, I feel like that was a missed opportunity. I mean, he ends up being adopted by the Sudermans,
Right.
And
then obviously later, because of Marcus Kent, his like publisher slash coach and stuff like that, like he changed his name, which I think is really sweet and stuff like that. Yeah, but it's Dale Suderman? Like, god damn, you want to talk about a down home, that fucking Dale Suderman. Like that's pretty down home.
Yeah, and his parents, both pass, and he's raised in the system, and he discovers this ability to play sports.
Yeah.
And parlays that into a very lucrative career, and he's very self-centered, right?
Yeah.
But again, there was this moment in his past where he was displaying his powers to his mother, and she was like, "You're a demon possessed," and she falls down the stairs and dies.
Possessed, yeah, and dies. Yeah, fucking Jesus Christ. Yeah, because he uses X-ray vision to find her glasses behind the.
Yeah, which is right out of all of the pre-crisis origin stories. Like anytime you have the montage of him using his powers, it was like, oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but she freaks out because they're obviously, Bible Belt biblical people and shit. Right. And it's just like, oh my God, you must be like a demon. She falls down the stairs, ends up dying, which I think plays into that story really well because he's trauma based.
Yeah.
Because after that, he regresses. He doesn't talk to anybody until he makes a shot on the basketball court. He's like, oh shit, I played basketball. And they're even shocked because, again, he didn't know. He takes the shot from like 3/4 court. And they're like, oh, you got to come with us. And you figure Superman wouldn't miss a lot of shots. I don't know if you'd go 100%, but it would almost be harder for someone with super strength. I don't know how light a basketball is, but considering him and Wonder Woman move the earth by fucking, you can assume he's got to tone it down quite a bit in order to shoot a basketball.
It's funny, man. I hadn't thought about that, but that's actually a good point. For all of the sports, it feels like his abilities would be the least helpful in basketball.
Yeah. Dude, imagine dunking on someone as Superman. You turn him into paste.
Yeah.
Fuck posterizing. You would turn him into pink mist. And it's weird because in Superman, what is it, 1 or 2, the flick, he throws a baseball into the atmosphere. He's on the farm, picks up the baseball and chucks it. Imagine Superman as your starting pitcher. Dude, he would throw it through the catcher, through the ump, and 4 states away. So I guess basketball was the easiest. I mean, obviously, he ends up doing football and stuff, right? He's awesome. No, he was a 32 gold Olympic medalist. Shit, yeah, of course. What are you gonna do? Fucking flew him with the high jump? That's not gonna happen.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's our initial setup here, and here too, we have this change of heart. There's Lex ultimately uncovers his alien origin.
Yeah.
Right.
And uses that against them, which is, pure Lex and shit.
Yeah.
And just because he's pissed.
Right.
Because he buys the land, or they agree to let him put his team's land there. And Lex just kind of is as a baby bitch the whole time. It's not even he's typically what we see, a level 9 intellect and stuff like that. He's just a businessman that even tries to recruit him. So come pay for my team. We'll give you this, this, and this. Do you think he needs any of that shit? He didn't need any of that. He got his own comic. They're making a fucking cartoon. The dude's got everything.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then there's this, randomly we have John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, show up, and
there's other people like that. Yeah, I know.
He talks a little sense into him, and then he returns. Suderman returns to Kansas, and he was struck by lightning while he's flying in, and he's taken in by the Kents, and then so once again you have the Kents' influence here, sort of setting him on a better path. Out of all of the stories we read, it was great to see that Garcia Lopez art, but overall, this really did the least for me. To be honest, this was never a story that was even on my radar. I have vague memories of probably seeing it at the shop, back in the 90s, but
right.
I had never read it. It's not one that I would particularly recommend, but is there anything else you want to say about Speeding Bullets or Darkseid or Ink before we get into the Red Sun?
I do like how he humbles himself at the end. He fakes leaving the planet just so he can become a reporter. That again is a return to who we know. It was a what if Elseworlds story of a guy with superpowers and didn't do anything with them, right? Because he didn't know what to do or whatever, but he knows he has these talents because he buried them because of trauma. But I do think as a parting shot, I would have liked to see the traveling who was a drunk, right? He turns he was drinking on the road, wasn't he? So he's a drunk, he hits a kid, the kid ends up, he's the miracle baby, turns his life around. But then you don't see that until the end. I would have liked to see like to get to there. So at least at the end, you're like, who the fuck is that? Wait, is that the traveling set? And you got to go like all the way back because it's such like 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 a weak pause in the beginning. Like at that point, you don't even need it. Just have him find the fucking spaceship. Like, what do you even need him to? Well, I mean, I guess, you know, Superman turning people's lives around. So I guess if you look at it like that, that even in this story, he still turns people's lives around, although he hit him with a fucking car. Like maybe there's that, but I don't know. I think it was a bunch of missed opportunities there that could have been a little bit more expanded on, but maybe they just had a page requirement. It's like, nah, dude, like this is all you're getting. This is a fucking single story. So we don't give a shit. Just do the best you can with it.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. That's the sad thing to me about Superman Incorporated, where I really feel like that salesman was the most interesting character and got the most shortchanged.
Yeah, I wanted to see more of his story, right? Because he ends up being like a motivational speaker. Like, how did he get there? Like, at least, like, cut down the amount of like, I hit fucking 82 home runs. Like, you can still run that story, but also run this other one. So this way, we kind of feel for him a little bit more, as opposed to just literally putting him in as a placeholder so Lex can find a fucking ship. Like, I don't know. That seems like lazy or weak writing. I won't call it lazy. It's definitely weak, though.
All right. We come now just past the hour mark, but we made it to Superman Red Son, the story of Kal-El's ship landing in the Soviet Union in 1938. And we follow this story across decades. Like I said, read it at the time, enjoyed it, never went back to it until now. So I've read it now, you know, twice in 20 years. I did watch for the first time the animated movie. Let me toss it to you first, because I know you did a lot of reading. I know you've been really into this. I mean, what is your take on Red Son, and how, if at all, has your perspective changed?
Okay, I have never watched the cartoon and read the book side by side. The first time I read Red Son, I was enthralled. I was like, this is amazing. This is amazing. So much so that I know people can't see it, but I already took the picture. I have the Red Son Superman and the Wonder Woman statues with the hammer and sickle. I found a fucking communist Russia flag. Like, I have a whole background. I got the Red Son hat on. Let me tell you something. When I come on the show for Anthony, I don't fuck around. So now, after watching the animated version, I found I had more of a problem with the book version.
Oh, like, interesting.
A lot. To the point where now I don't see them as adaptations of one another. It's called the same thing, kind of starts the same way, but I think the movie is, like, I want to say the animated movie is better. They even jab at the book a couple times. Like, I don't know if you picked up on that. There was a couple times where like clear fucking jabs are thrown at what Millard did with the book. Now, I'm not taking away from the book. Again, that's what made me buy these, right? I love the book for what it was. But when I saw this, I was like, yeah, it is fucking kind of weird. Like, it started to open up my eyes to different stuff. Not that I don't like it any less. I just think I like what the movie did a little bit more in kind of all aspects.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, like, what were some of the jabs that you noticed? Because I didn't. Okay, I don't think they registered with me.
I had to write the shit down because, dude, I got like 7 pages of fucking notes about this thing. Okay, so at one point, it's the Lex part. So Lex says checkmate at the end, right? But in the panels, he's very malicious when he does it, a la whatever the fuck he becomes afterwards, which he gets rid of one godlike despot and becomes one. In the book, when he says it in the movie, it's heartfelt, kind of like, yeah, I did plan for this within a 0.10%, but it kind of worked out, and I made a friend, sort of, right? And then there was the other, the clear shot at the book was at the end of the book, Lex stays, he colonizes the universe or the solar system, right? They take away sleep, dude. They take away sleep, which means he is more of a communist in essence than Superman was. Superman throughout the whole book and movie shifted. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to beat anyone to submission. He beat everyone with argument. The only tyrannical thing technically that he did was implant those things into people's heads, but they were ruining his utopia, right? But the clear shot was Lex stays on to the point where that fucking ending, which I'd never really vibed with the ending, where it's like, oh, now we're replaying it all over again. And I have a theory about that too. At the end, Lois says, what are you going to do now? And Lex says, a good man knows when to leave. And she's like, what are you going to do? He's like, I don't know, like maybe go to a desert and like hang out with the woman in my dream. Lex is he's a beautiful dude in this one, man. He starts off a little obsessed, but he turns into a beautiful dude. And I think the shot is the book had him do this and this. He lived to 180 and he never pushed back from the table. The first thing she says is, so what are you going to do? He's like, a good man knows when, or she's like, oh, I can't believe you're giving all this up. He says, a good man knows when to leave. And like, he's fucking right. He's right.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack with Red Sun. I'll say as far as overall impressions, I think what does really come through, I think in both the movie and the comic, is that, you know, this is not an evil Superman story or a malicious Superman story. He is
not at all
a product of his environment, and he has bought into the communist ideology. He's which ultimately like well-intentioned.
Barely? Yeah, like barely communist, like communist on paper, where it's like, listen, we're all going to live a great life. No one's going to be better than anybody. That's the utopia you're trying to make. Not like communism where it's like, well, these people are going to get this and you're not going to get shit. Right. He creates communism coming off of Stalin, which dies in fucking two different ways, obviously. But it was like, he just wanted the world to be happy. And he expresses that a lot. As a matter of fact, you can even make the claim that America is the one putting out propaganda. They do it a couple times over the course of the story. Oh, he could see you from space. And I think at one point, Martha is like, he could watch us like through our house and shit like that. Like, they're the ones putting that out. Like Russia and the superpower and like the whole like Warsaw Pact nations, they weren't putting out the propaganda. America was like, he's going to come here and fucking burn everybody. And everyone's like, holy shit. And now they're driven by fear. So I don't think Superman was the tyrant in that one. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I did appreciate that, you know, you see the positive and negatives of both America and the Soviet Union here. It doesn't play as just like this pro-America, you know, comic or animated movie. So I did appreciate that. And I think that, you know, in some respects, this reminded me of like the King of the World storyline that I've talked about before from the Triangle era, or even Injustice to an extent, of this idea, if Superman exerts his power, his influence on a global scale like this, how does he do it? How does he maintain it? Right? I mean, there are some practical questions about how to do this. And, you know, in this story, like you said, the answer is, again, these devices that control his dissidents. Now, he's not enslaving and killing people like Stalin was. So in his mind, I think he feels like he's found a better path. I think us as the audience, you know, and those who oppose him in the story recognize, well, you are essentially bottling these people, and, you know, we'll come back to that. So, you know, it's not that he's necessarily found the right path, but is definitely coming at it from a well-intentioned place.
Yes, which is always the case, right?
And as far as the differences, right, because I do think this was really interesting. And I watched the movie first just to sort of get myself back into the Red Sun mode, and then I read the comic. And other than the ending, which vast difference between the two, but I felt like Lex, the depiction of Lex, it was like night and day between the movie and the comic, because
it started off kind of similar.
Yeah.
But when Lois gives him the gift in the movie, you can see the worm turning. He's like, oh, it's beautiful. Like, it's exact, like it's, and their chess pieces of him. I was like, that's really, and he does say the same thing in the book where he's like, oh, I'll have my secretary pick some up. But when he says it in the book, it's a big fuck you. When he says it in here, you could tell he's upset. He's fucking upset that he has to do that. Like, he's genuinely upset. And the love connection between them is so dope in the movie. In the fucking book, they can't stand each other. She even says, like, I'm using them because, you know, like, fucking, why wouldn't I? In the book, Lois gives three, in the movie, she gives 3 reasons. They're like, why do you even with him? He says, he supports my career. In the book, he says the planet is an eyesore.
Yeah.
So right away, he didn't give a shit. 2, the sex is phenomenal. which they even show the scene of like them like post-coitus and shit like that, which I thought, well, you know, it's fucking adult or whatever. And then the third one is he's going to change the world. And it's not like he's going to change the world because he's a prick. He's not overly intelligent, which is another problem that looking back I had with the book. But they genuinely care about each other. He just gets caught up and momentarily obsessed, and he has a fucking like a completely dope redemption at the end.
Yes, totally. I mean, the Lex in the comic really plays as more unhinged, especially as the story goes on. Whereas there's a lot more, I don't know, integrity or nobility to the Lex in the movie, which ultimately I prefer the Lex in the movie for that reason, and also I think for the reflection that it has on Lois, right? Because if she's with him in the movie, like you said, I think there's enough to account for what she's getting out of this relationship or like why she would stay. In the comic, it's real, you know, it's tough, right? It's like, it really does a disservice, I think, to the character of Lois.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at first when I read the book, I'm like, wow, Lex is really smart. Like at one point he's playing chess against 5 people, learning Urdu, reading Machiavelli. And at one point he's like, oh, I created something while I was in the bathroom. Now that I look back at it, I'm like, all they did was use Lex's intelligence as a deus ex machina to get them out of shit. Like he just randomly shows up in Russia and fucking Superman's, how'd you get past the defenses? And I think his line was something like, oh, defenses, I thought they were like ornaments or something. Like he completely plays it out. And I think the audience was just like, sure, he's that smart. But I think they overplayed it too much. I think like the playing chess, learning this. And at one point he's like, how'd you fucking hear that? He's like, oh, I learned how to read lips like last night. Like, I think it was a little too much on the intelligence level, like just for shock value. I don't know. Like, what you think about how he was portrayed in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think unhinged was just the word that I kept going back to. I mean, as far as the intelligence, you know, it didn't feel so divorced from the Lex that we've gotten before, especially in the comics. So that wasn't necessarily so off-putting to me per se. I think, you know, one of the things, and I want to ask you how you feel about this, because one of the other big differences that I saw was, you know, was Lois's role with respect to getting through to Superman. So in the movie, you know, she, you know, and of course Lex is manipulating all this, right? But he has Lois give Superman this information about the atrocities that Stalin is committing. I want to circle back to that, but what I want to jump to,
that was drastically
very
different.
And so I want to come back to that. But in the big climax, right, of both stories, Superman, you know, shows up right at the White House to invade. He's been resisting that the whole story, right? He doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to. He tells Brainiac he doesn't want to.
Right. And then, you know, the United States sends the Green Lanterns after him, and it kind of like forces his hand, and he's like, okay, like now we're going to do this.
I have to. Right.
And he, you know, shows up with, you know, Brainiac along for the ride. And of course we'll find out that Brainiac has not been reprogrammed, and he's been, you know,
playing him the whole time.
And they'll ultimately, you know, Superman will have to seemingly sacrifice himself to stop Brainiac. Of course he will live. But anyway, in the comic, it's Lex who's ultimately able to get through to Superman with this sentence that he wrote.
With weak sauce. I'm sorry. That shit was weak sauce. Completely fucking weak sauce, dude. I did not like how the book did it. I like how the movie did it a lot.
Okay. So
because oh no, good.
No, I was just gonna say, so, you know, for anyone who needs a refresher, the note that he writes, and we see a little flashback of him telling Lois, like, I'm going, like, the power of words, like, I'm gonna like get at the heart of you know, everything he's, you know, afraid of within himself, something to that effect. And the note is, you know, why don't you just put the entire world in a bottle? Right. Just like Stalingrad had been reduced to this bottled city when Brainiac first appeared. Right. This
and in the book, it wasn't even supposed to be Stalingrad. It was supposed to be the spot in Ukraine where he grew up.
Oh, right.
So it wasn't even supposed to be that spot. Like, that was the fuck up, which is when you first realize that was engineered by Luthor. He's like, oh, he fucked it up. Like, he's a level 12 intelligence. He didn't even get the right fucking city.
Right.
That's why that shit was weak sauce at the end, because he gives him a letter about putting the world in a bottle, right? Which contradicts itself because Stalingrad, the city in the book, is attacked by like a moth that got in.
Right.
So he couldn't even protect the people in the bottle. So I think giving him, now Lex says, I'm going to battle you with this. And he points to his head. Brainiac already told him, listen, you would have killed yourself within 19 minutes based on his estimation if he was talking to you. So you definitely don't want to do that. Lois coming out with the actual city and explaining the same thing, just opposite, where it's like, listen, I understand you want to protect people, but this is what it ends up being. And you don't like this. So there's that. I don't think that translated over with just the letter. I think showing him the city and being like, listen, this is what you want to do because you want to protect everybody. Like, I get that. But that means you got to put the whole world in one. And then what are you going to do then? Like, what's the next step? Like, how can you do all that? And that breakdown, I get. Just him getting the letter that's saying, from Lex of all fucking people, what are you going to put the whole world in a box? Like, it came off not genuine enough for him to have a knee-shattering break. Like, he gets down on his knees and started crying. I'm like, really? Over that? Like, I think between the two, Lois presenting it, not giving him a letter, but presenting it, way fucking more important.
So I don't know ultimately where I land. I feel like it's definitely a more emotional, impactful moment in the movie. Now, of course, you have the music, you have the vocal performances, so there's a little bit more to enhance it. Arguing on the other side, I don't ultimately look at Red Son, right, as a Superman Lois story, but I think you very much can look at it as a Superman Lex story. And in that context, Lex being the one to deliver those words. Now,
right.
Whether the letter seems silly or not, I don't know. But
right.
The fact that Lex is the one to deliver it, I do think that better honors the setup of this story as this battle between the two of them. Even though, again, I do think from an emotional standpoint, the Lois scene in the movie is more impactful.
Right. And that's why I said I think it needs to be viewed as two different stories completely. They're both him landing in Russia, but it's not the same story. Like, not at all. And then not like the fucking shit they did with Injustice. This was like a completely legitimate different story. One gave you a really good feeling. The other one was like, Jesus Christ, like Lex pretty much manipulated everyone. And she makes mention of that. When they're saying, we got to do what Lex says, let's know what's best. Lois says, you don't realize we're all just chess pieces that he's moving around a board? But like the chess symbolism kind of comes back a lot. She knew. In the book, she didn't want to be around it. Like, she didn't want anything. Like, she's the one who's calling him out. Like, listen, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're obsessed with this. And in the book, in the movie he does too, but in the book, there's like these little things that take over his entire life.
Right.
So I think Lex delivering those words in person would have had more of an effect, but the delivery would have been different. Like, it wouldn't have been an emotional moment. In the movie, it works as an emotional moment. In the book, it couldn't be an emotional moment. I just don't think the letter does it for me. Like the handwritten letter, where it's like, I'm going to stop him in one sentence. Like, I don't know. They didn't really do it for me.
I hear you. And then, one of the other big things, which we were getting at a second ago, is in the movie, you get this, very, I think, powerful sequence, right? Lois gives Superman information about what Stalin has been up to, how he's been dealing with dissidents.
Right.
And Superman follows that trail to this, prison camp, and he finds Svetlana, his friend from, or Lana Lang, his friend from the collective where he grew up.
Right.
And, in her death throes, she's saying, that
be the person to save everybody.
Right. Exactly.
Like, that's what you said.
The strong, the strong lead, and you're the strongest one there is. And,
right.
And he goes and kills Stalin.
Yeah. Laser eyes. Straight up. And then they come in, and that guy, Pyotr, the illegitimate son of Stalin, has no play in the movie. They just lifted him right out, which honestly, you didn't really need him in the fucking first place. Like, he was just kind of like there as like a whisper maybe, but Superman never, I keep going to say Clark. He wasn't even Clark in that one. Right. Because when the guards come in, they're like, all right, what's next? Like, you were clearly more powerful. You didn't like it. What are we going to do now? And that's why the making of a utopia made a little bit more sense in the movie.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like that to me was so much more effective than in the comic where, Stalin dies. He's been poisoned.
Yeah.
Right. And then Superman, he's reluctant, but then he ultimately assumes the leadership role. And
he's pretty reluctant the whole fucking time. He's like, dude, he keeps saying it. I'm not a politician. Like, I don't want to deal with politics. I just want to help people. Like, he keeps saying that. He says it, I think, once or twice in the movie, but I remember on page 47 of book 2, it finally says Superman started to tighten his grip. It's a fucking 3-issue series, which means he didn't start getting like iron fisted in terms of, hey, look, we're going to do it this way till 5 pages at the end of the second book. So I definitely did see, but in the movie, he was more very stoic in the beginning. Then we see a change. In the movie, he's kind of like the same way the whole time. Like, hey, he makes his speeches, but he's genuinely a nice dude.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I really think that revelation he has in the movie, right? When he finds Svetlana and she's dying and then he confronts and kills Stalin. I think that better sets up the rest of the story than the comic does, because it shows his line, like where the line is, like, this is not right to him that these people would be, imprisoned and starved. Right. And so even though he employs violence in that moment to kill Stalin, moving forward, that's certainly not going to be his that's not going to be the way he operates. But he is going to be reprogramming people. He is definitely crossing a line. But I think being able to see Superman see the violence and see, that prison, you understand why he doesn't view those brain devices as the same thing, as being as bad, even though we're watching it and it's like, oh man, you're going way too far here. This is not right.
Yeah, but I think at one point he even says, he's like, well, they're happier now. Like, we can integrate them back into society.
Right.
Remember, these are people that are like blowing shit up. Like, they're not, like, what are you going to do? Lock them up? So he's like, listen, the best thing we can do now is, but he's also not a scientist either. So he's like, how can we do this? He's like, we're going to fit him with these things, call it a fucking day. Like, and he says he's not a politician. So like, what's his alternative? Like, he doesn't want to use internment, like the prison camps. We already know that, which are really prominent in the animated version.
Yeah.
I don't think they appear at all in the book, did they?
I don't think so.
No. Actually, the only thing that looked like that was when he goes down to fight Batman. Like, that was the only part. But like, he didn't know how to handle that. He says it all the time. He's like, I'm not a politician. So like, he has this technology to rewrite someone's brain. So fucking use it.
I feel like you're more forgiving of these brain devices than I am. I feel
like. No. So yes, but no, right? Yes, because I don't think he understood the difference between building a utopia and forcing people to do stuff. It was like, these people are going to continue to hurt my people unless I do something. The alternative is killing them or putting them in a camp, and he don't want to do that.
And well, kind of on that note, I mean, I'm not, I took all my history classes and everything, but I don't purport to be an expert on communism or socialism or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, do you think that this is an instance of his upbringing and the ideology that he learned coming into play, like this idea of this collective and everyone being together? So, brainwashing people, reprogramming them, it doesn't necessarily sit poorly with him because he feels like, well, now we're all
now
one.
We're perfect. Yep. And I think that's where his version of communism comes in, right? Like, it even says in both mediums, there's no more hunger. Everyone has a house. Everyone's got food. And the role that Svetlana plays in the book is way different. He sees her on a food line.
Right.
And he's like, holy shit. He's like, what are you doing here? He's like, we're starving. Like, no one's got any food. So he gives her like a job, which she's not fucking qualified for, but she gives him but like, he gives her a job to take care of her because he recognizes that. In the movie, she's put there and he's like, what are you even doing here? She's like, they put me here because I knew you before. And the person that like you could be, like, they didn't, like, they wanted to just rewrite him completely, like brainwashing him. So if that's the only thing he knew, especially in the book, like, of course he would fucking do it to other people.
Right.
Because he thinks it's the right thing to do. Not because he's like, well, fuck these people. He's like, listen, I got to protect people. This is how I'm going to do it. I genuinely think he was in the right. I don't think it was a tyrant. Like, we view it as a tyrant move. I don't think he did.
Yeah, again, I do think as far as what his intentions are, what he thinks is right. Yeah, he's not coming at it from, from a place of malice or anything like that, regardless of what the effect ends up being. How did you feel about the treatment of Wonder Woman between the two versions of the story? Very different.
Well, so in the book, obviously for people who didn't read it, she comes kind of the same way. She's like, oh, men are starting to do the right thing, but she brings Hippolyta, and like they all kind of like hang out and shit, and like they go to dinners, and she was like, the relationship in the comic is we're business partners. There's love, but they're business partners. Like they like to take pictures with each other. In the movie, it goes way deeper. And I think I like the Wonder Woman in the movie better. The one in the story, she does make moves against him, because in the fight with Batman even calls her Diane. He's like, what are you doing? So apparently they made some sort of deal that he had to go. He had to go. He's ruining shit. The Amazons recognize it. He's got to go. I like her in the movie because during the climactic scene, or during one of the fights with the Green Lanterns, which I don't even know what the fuck they had them in there based on what happened, or tell Hal Jordan's backstory. Like, that made no sense to me. She comes down now fully fucking rejuvenated with a great look, right? Dude, I dig that white and the gold and shit like that. And she's like, listen, I'm going to give you guys another opportunity. Stop. If you stop now, we can work with each other to fix this. Both sides say no. Superman tries to attack her, and in probably one of the pimpest moments ever, she makes him look like a bitch because she catches his hand. Like, she's like, that was your last straw. Amazons are never coming back. We're out. And I also like her, like, he tries to kiss her in the movie, and she goes, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I thought that's what we had to do, because he doesn't know any better. She's like, listen, I come from an island with all women. And she raised her eyebrows. She's like, what do you think that means? And he goes, oh, thank God. Like, he's relieved.
Yeah.
Like, he's relieved. Like, he doesn't want that relationship. So I did like I think the one in the movie was more likable, obviously, but I think she played more of an important role too, at least for the positivity of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, in the book, I mean, I know you say they were business partners, but I mean, they, clearly this unrequited feeling that she has for him. And I'm glad that they did away with that for the movie. I think that elevated her character. I think having her be this, unacknowledged, romantic interest in the comics is weaker. And it doesn't,
it's fleet. Like, she wouldn't do that. Like, that's why I like the one in the movie better. Well, she comes from she just showed up from an island of women. Like, what the fuck is she going to be like, I love you for? Like, it's like the Steve Trevor thing we were talking about. She's known him for 4 seconds, and she's like, we got, like, that didn't make, like, yes, there was a static, right? Like a love static. I just don't think it should have been there. Like, it was just oddly placed. And she breaks her rope because he tells her to.
In the comic.
Yeah, in the movie, he doesn't say that. She does it because now she's sick of both of them.
Right. And in the comic, after she breaks the lasso, she's like, her brain is like fried for a second, and she's like really having a hard time. And Superman does not even acknowledge that. He just starts talking about like Lex.
Yep. And she gets really sick. Like, I think a couple panels, they show her like in a bed. Like, she's like deteriorating because her soul is attached to the lasso. But I think, so I like them both because everyone knows Wonder Woman's my shit, right? But I think the one in the movie is perfect for the movie. I think the one in the book is probably perfect for the book. Because like I said, I'm viewing them, I'm not even comparing them. I'm identifying the differences between them, and I'm viewing them as two completely different things.
Gotcha. Now, I think the biggest difference, other than the depiction of Lex, is the ending. And that was one of our patron questions. Brian asked, which ending do we prefer? The comic ending or the movie? Yeah.
Before we get there, I've been waiting to ask this from you because I jumped up so fast the other night. I started telling Sarah about this, and God bless her. She does what you kind of did to Ralph, where like she lets me nerd out and shit like that. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And she's like, babe, you're so fucking cute. What'd you think about Batman?
I enjoyed this take well enough. The idea of him being this, rebel freedom fighter, it felt I mean, look, we've talked about this before, you know, when it comes to, you know, pitting Superman and Batman against each other, and Superman being the government stooge and, you know, Batman being the symbol of freedom and resistance. You know, is that my favorite take on the dynamic? No, not really. But I think in the context of this, it worked well enough. I liked the look of Red Son Batman. Yeah, I didn't have such a strong reaction, I guess, but I thought it accomplished what it needed to in the story. Why? What about you?
You might now, because I'm about to drop what I think is a bomb, right? That wasn't Batman. That was a guy in a Batman suit. That was the Joker. He was the Joker. In every scene, in most of the panels, he's smiling. When they go down to his thing, he's like kind of hokey. He's got all those little things that they're smiling. He tells the people, you have 10 minutes to get out, blows it up after 10 seconds. When he drops the fake doll in the book, it's got a smile on it. He even says, we're agents of chaos. That is fucking Joker all day, every day. If in the book, right, Superman's utopia does not need a vigilante, because it doesn't, right? Joker's, Batman / Joker's whole crew now becomes the people trying to upheave it for no fucking reason. The one in the movie is a little bit more redeemable, because when he locks them in, he's like, now my people can take our country back. The other fucking Batman was like, fuck everybody. And I was like, that's not even Batman. Like, that is the Joker in a Batman fucking outfit. That's what I picked up from it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's an interesting take. Yeah, especially in the comic for sure. Because isn't he blowing up buildings with people in it?
Well, right? So in both, he blows up both buildings. In the movie, it's assumed that people get out, and other stuff does start to blow up, but there's no Superman flying there. In the book, there's no Superman flying down and seeing dead bodies. We don't see any dead bodies. As a matter of fact, he spends most of his time running, and then he disappears. In the fucking movie, he hijacks a helicopter and he's shooting shit all over the place. But I think as an agent of chaos, someone that is against the system and not as a vigilante, because technically Superman is the law.
Right.
So no one's breaking any fucking laws. They're the ones breaking the laws. In both mediums, he calls himself Chaos. And in almost every scene that you look at, he's got a fucking smile on his face. I think they tried to create this Batman where in that world, Batman would need to be the Joker. In a utopia where he wants everything to flip over, Batman now becomes the Joker under the sign of this is justice to him.
Right.
Our Batman doesn't have to do that. I saw that fucking duality and I was like, holy shit. Like, there's a reason why he's smiling and everything. In the movie, he doesn't fucking do it as much because he's a little bit more serious about what he's trying to do. In the comic, he's kind of like hunched over and he's laughing. And there's a little pig that says like something beef or whatever. That's got a smile on it. He passes something else with a smile on it. I think that was like engineered to be like, in a perfect world, someone who wants the dissidents to take it back is fucking Joker. It's completely fucking Joker, just in a Batman suit. Like, that's what I pulled from it. And as an English teacher, I always tell my guys, anything can be true as long as you back it up with evidence. Someone else can disagree with you, but I think there's strong evidence to think that at least in his mind, while putting together that story and especially the story, he becomes the agent of chaos that the world needs, because he thinks that they do. He's not fighting crime. There is no crime. So what is he fighting? The authoritarian system.
He's the hero they need, but not the one they deserve.
Right, dude? It fucking is.
No, that's interesting. I like that take. I mean, now, although on the other hand, you look at Dark Knight Returns or Batman v Superman, the line, we were always criminals, right? But
yes,
there's something to be said for that. And maybe as you were saying that, I was like, well, depending on how you view the Batman Joker dynamic, right? Are they two sides of the same coin, right?
Right.
And so in a certain context like this one, yeah, maybe are there aspects or methods of the Joker that a quote unquote Batman might employ because they
to
are
work in that situation. Yeah, absolutely.
Counterpoints to each other. Very interesting. No, I appreciate that take.
And I do like the nod to Miller, and I do like the nod to, well, it was pre-Snyder, but in the book, Batman's in that iconic pose dragging Superman. and giving the same speech. Instead of like, men are strong, men are powerful, he's like, we're not your ants. Like, you're not above us. Essentially, men are strong. You're fucking strong just because you came from a different planet. But that iconic, like, dragging him by the cape, which we've seen over and over again, I like that nod. I do. I like that nod. Because even though it was for a different reason, I do like that image. Because we've seen it so many times before. Because it really is an iconic moment.
For sure. All right. Shall we talk the ending? All right. So in both stories, it seems that Superman has died saving the world from Brainiac, but rather he lives and he assumes his traditional reporter garb.
Right.
And, you know, in both stories, there's a brief moment where maybe Lois sees him, maybe she doesn't.
Yeah.
And Lex becomes president. Now, that's essentially where our animated movie leaves off here. Whereas,
and then he looks at her, he disappears through so Superman shows up, he ends up living, shows up as a reporter. Lois sees him in the crowd, she smiles because they had a good at least a good relationship, like near the end when she realized what was going on. She puts a smile on, she got purple eyes, which I always thought was cool. It was like very Star Sapphire, as almost like she's motivated by love. In the movie, she really was. Well, like the love of people, love of her husband, love of her relationship. So I thought the purple eyes to me was symbolic of that Star Sapphire lilt. So I did like the ending of the movie for what it was. Now let's have you explain the ending of the fucking book.
I mean, it sounds like you're not a fan of the ending of the book.
I am, but it hit different this time than it did originally.
Gotcha. So in the comic, we follow, and you had laid out a lot of this earlier, but we follow the history of Earth centuries down the line.
Yeah.
To the point that the sun has become red and descendants of Luthor.
Luthor, that's why it's L, right?
We find out that Jor-El is actually a descendant of Lex Luthor.
Right.
And has failed to convince the ruling council of Earth that the planet is doomed.
Right.
And he and his wife send their infant in a rocket back in time to 1938 Soviet Union with the hope that he'll be able to change the course of history and set Earth on a better path.
Now, wait a minute. I might have read it wrong. So I got to check. So you keep going, but I got to find something because I could have swore to God that was written in a different way. I thought she said, oh, if we send him there, the sun is still yellow, and they didn't know what was going to happen. Not that they were sending him back in time, but they were sending him to Earth. So what does it say? Because I may have read it wrong.
So she said, or actually, it's actually Jor-El. So Laura talks about the yellow sun and how he'll be different. And it's the traditional dynamic where Jor-El's like, he'll be a god to them. He doesn't use those words, but that's the idea. And then Jor-El in his final panel says, goodbye, my son. Go back and change the world so that we might not become this cold, complacent lot. Go back and bring a little light to our lives again.
I don't think that meant go back in time. It could be the case that it was. I think he knows that they're going back to Earth to try and fix it again. Like, that's what I think. So I don't think it was a time thing. I don't. The way I saw it was in the book, I originally liked it because it was a twist at the end. I did think it was an odd twist. Like, what the fuck is that even doing there? Until when I reread it, and I thought she said, but the sun there is still yellow.
Right.
And he was like, right, there'll be a God to these people, a la the first conversation that they had. I don't think it was time. I think they went so far into the future that they were literally sending him to Earth that they left, right? Because it's not even on Earth anymore. Like, they go inhabit the fucking universe. I think what Millar was trying to say was when you put the power from a godlike creature into a man, that man becomes a god. He cures cancer. He said there was no more AIDS. People don't need to sleep. He actually takes all the politicians and generals and he makes them like artists and artisans and stuff like that. Like he completely rewrites everything. Now we're talking thousands of years into the future, so much so that we're in fucking Deep Space Nine, right? Their planet is about to blow up like it has before. So the way I saw it was man has fucked up so bad that at the end they had to send him to another planet because they forgot what happened thousands of years ago. So essentially what I picked up from it is they have to live this cycle until they get it right. Like that's how I saw it instead of back in time. Right? Because wouldn't they know that the sun was yellow? Like she brought it up like, oh yeah, we can't send him there. The sun is yellow. Like wouldn't they know that if they were sending him? Like wouldn't they have all the information about what happened the first time to fucking send him back? Like why were they even sending him there? Because typically we'd assume that it was still a utopia, right? He cured all diseases and stuff. So why send him there to try and fix it?
Because the planet's going to die.
Right, but why send him back to Earth? If there's nothing wrong with it. Right? So like they know their planet's going to die.
I think they're on Earth though. I mean, wait, I want to make sure I want to make sure I get, yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. I think they're fucking with it being cyclical, right? I think everything has become a giant circle. And what Millar was trying to say at the end, and I mean, I could be wrong. Like I've never looked it up before. I have a tendency not to do that because I want to just like pick it apart and analyze it for myself. I think they started on Earth. Then it said that they colonized the solar system. So now they went deep out, right? They went so far out that it retold the origin that we already saw in the beginning with who we thought was Jor-El and his wife, which happened now to have the same name as his parents. So I saw it as, for some reason, the big twist is they live just in this universe that continues to revolve and do the same thing over and over again. That's how I saw it.
I mean, as far as the cyclical aspect, I don't disagree with that, but I mean, to me, I don't know. I mean, to me, the twist has always been that they send him back to the past of Earth, like that they're on Earth and they send him back to the past of their planet.
I don't know, but now that we're in this fucking conversation, I'm fucking digging the shit out of it. But like, if they knew that it started there, right? Like the Luthers are very prideful, right? It all started with Lex. It ended with Lex. Then before he died, he colonized the universe before he died.
Right.
So wouldn't they know that our Earth was ground zero for this thing? So why would they send him back? Like, if you send them back, isn't it doing the same thing? You send them back in time and then you're still going to get to the same point anyway.
So, okay. Well, first, let me say that it does seem like I think they are on Earth because Jor-El says, I gave them firm, substantiated evidence that the Earth is on the brink of collapsing into our own sun.
Okay.
And they merely think that the planet is shifting its orbit. Right. The planet, like the sun has turned from yellow to red. So they send him, they sent to save him, right? They send him back to when the sun was yellow and he, wouldn't just survive, but thrive there. I mean, I think I get what you're saying, right? But I think I don't know. I think maybe the idea is that they've sent him back so far and no one, maybe because of the way communist Soviet Union was set up, it's like there aren't, like, I don't think Jor-El and Lara know that this communist dictator who disappeared centuries ago is the one that they sent back. I think that's been like lost to time.
But then it still is a giant start over again.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
like,
no,
I think
for sure.
that's one of the main points that's being made is like they came to the same conclusion that they did originally. But the thing that throws me off is, did they say at the beginning of the series that it was the same two? Like in name wise, if we go all the way back, actually, I got the digital version, so I'll check.
What do you mean the same two?
His parents, right?
Yeah.
Do we see, because again, it's been like all the way back in the beginning, is it Jor-El?
We don't see his landing. Like, it just starts with...
swear to God, in one of them... Okay, all right. So then...
I mean, it just starts with, Perry calls Lois, and he's like, hey, there's this big story that's breaking. So we don't... It's not... Like, we don't see the beginning. Like, we don't see Jor-El and Lara putting a baby in the rocket or anything like that.
I like to think that they're stuck in this loop.
Yeah, I
But
think
that's
that's
what
fair. Yeah, yeah.
I think, because technology, they cure everything. They can't cure what's going on. So I think to bring it back there, even if you don't show the origin story in the beginning, I think bringing it back to something that we know happens just means that they're going to let the spaceship go. It's going to land back in fucking Russia, and the whole thing's going to happen all over again, and eventually lead to that point.
Right.
And then it's going to happen again and lead to that point, because nothing. Like, I think the ending shows that nothing is going to change, even if it's sending them back to the past or sending them to Earth at that time. I think they're just going to keep reliving the same shit over and over again, and that's why I like it as a twist. I like that twist because it's like, fuck. Like, that's, but it goes in line with the story. Like, it tracks with the story. The story is very depressing.
No, I think
Very
that's the tragedy of the ending, that, yeah, this, we've seen what happens when this child lands when and where he does.
Right.
We see the ultimate outcome. So sending him back and hoping for, you know, a different result, I agree. I think that cyclical aspect is there. The other thing about it that I think is really interesting is, one of the things that keeps coming up, I mean, I guess particularly from Lex, is this idea that an alien shouldn't be exerting his will on the world, right? You're not from here. You're not an alien.
Right.
Or you are an alien, but it's like, no, he's not actually. He's not human.
Yeah.
And, you know, you sort of, I guess the question I have is like, well, if it was known, right, that he wasn't an alien, he was of Earth, I mean, from Lex's perspective, I don't think he would want anyone except himself to have that authority. So I think he still would have gone the way he did. But, you know, you wonder, it's like, would Superman as global dictator been better received? And if it had, might the ultimate outcome been different? Right? It's like the fact that he's an alien, you know, ends up being this, you know, seems to be a big piece of why he needs to be ousted. Right? But we don't know what would have happened had he stayed on, and would the Earth have, you know, ultimately perished?
Or, I mean, you can, because it's open-ended, you can say that when they sent him, he ends up on our Earth, like not that one, right? Like they sent him to an unknown planet that they also call Earth or whatever the fuck it is. And that's how we get our Superman. Like, you can think about it that way. That's why I like the ending just in general. Like, it's an extra twist that no one fucking saw coming. Like, no one saw that coming. Well, you started to in the late pages, because it turned to Lex Luthor and then Lex Lou and then Lex L. And I'm like, holy shit, no, they're not. So I thought it was good. Like, I still think it's cool. I just thought that to have it there, I liked it because it was a twist, but it wasn't necessary, as we saw in the movie. Like, it didn't have to be there. It could have just ended where it ended, with him being a fucking reporter and stuff like that. I don't think it had to. I like that they added it, but because it does add the wrinkle of like, oh shit, like, are they just restarting all over again? And I like that depression of it, where it's like, all he tried to do was help. Now he's going to get a second shot, but it's going to happen the same way over and over again. Like, that's hell.
Yeah, no, I think that it was a great ending. And to Brian's question, and I will diverge from you here. No, I think that was the failing of the movie. I mean, I think it's still enjoyable as it is, but I mean, and I don't know, I guess this is a matter of perspective. You know, when you look back on the Red Son comic, you know, what really stands out, what resonated the most. And you know, for me, that ending, I mean, like, that to me is what, you know, the initial setup, the setting of a Superman story in the Soviet Union. Like, that's a great hook. And, you know, you get the costume and, you know, the Supergirl TV show, they did their own take on that with the Red Daughter storyline and all that. But, you know, so that's a great hook, but I think it's that ending that cemented this as the classic that it's become.
No, but that's what I'm saying. It did, especially because of that. Otherwise, it would just be, hey, it's a great story, it's a great read. Adding that and keeping that door open is enough to, like, brain fuck you. As a matter of fact, I'll throw an extra one in there. What did Lex call the Phantom Zone? Do you remember?
Oh.
In the book, he calls the Phantom Zone Purgatory.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is very Dante, because in Purgatory, in Dante's Inferno, it's boring. There's just nothing there. It's a bunch of poets and, like, unbaptized kids just hanging out. They're not tortured. like in every other circle, but it's just like a fucking place that you go to hang out. And that's where he creates the gateway to go from one place to the other when he's up in the fucking ship. So I think the religious message of like this godlike figure trying to make everything perfect, to have it fucked up by man and now be stuck in this cycle, I think it is very much hand in hand with a Dante or like a Milton, kind of like playing like, you know, Satan as the hero, because he just wants to be treated like man. And it turns out that man will just fuck things up over and over again. So I like dipping into it that way, because like I said, I have a literature background. So when I see something like that, I'm like, holy shit. He calls he says, oh no, you call it whatever you want. We call it purgatory, but it's all can also be called the Phantom Zone. And that's not in there for no reason. It's not, because there's nothing going on there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I think with that ending, it's a great twist. The fact that Superman is a descendant of Lex,
right,
you know, puts a fun spin on it. And again, I think just the cyclical tragedy and the fact that, again, so much is made about the fact that this alien shouldn't be ruler of the world.
Right, but then the human becomes one. Like the human, like Lex essentially gets superpower. Space travel, lives to 180, cures all these diseases. Like they get rid of one superpowered being and create basically a planet of them that they don't need to sleep. They don't need to work. They've cured all diseases. So it makes sense that the people who give them away are more powerful than the people that they're giving him to. Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that to me makes that ending of the book perfect. I don't think that ending would have worked in the movie. I don't think the movie ending would have worked in the book, now that I think about it. I think they're perfect as separate standalones.
Interesting. I guess that, like, to hear you describe like what becomes of Earth and the solar system in the comic, I guess I didn't see it in as negative a way. Like I didn't see it as like, oh, Lex becomes, you know, what he was warning against. Because it seems, and, you know, Superman himself is narrating it, and it seems like it's good. Like it's positive. We don't have people who are brainwashed. So I don't know. I guess I think about that in the context of I think the, you know, more favorable depiction of Lex that we get in the movie. Yeah. And could that still have worked?
That's yeah.
So I don't know. I guess maybe that's a matter of perspective. I just feel like, not that the story has to have a twist ending, but I just feel like it's such an iconic part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I felt like that was missing. But overall, you know, I enjoyed both versions. I do think that the movie was very strong. And I think in the ways that most of the ways it diverged, I think it largely did improve. And so, yeah, I would definitely, if anyone hasn't checked it out yet, I do recommend it.
I mean, definitely check out both of them. Like, but watch them separately. Like, don't compare. Like, it's like we hear at AA meetings, right? Don't compare, just identify. Because they're fun. Both of them are great, regardless of the fact that they both exist. Like, I think they did a good job with this instead of what they did with Injustice. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think they swung and missed with that, but hit a home run with this one because you took the same property, but you told the story in two completely different ways, which I think is fucking awesome. Real quick, what'd you think about Bizarro? Because I think that plays on the Superman always being good thing. So what did you think about the two incarnations of Bizarro?
Yeah, I mean,
or Superior Man, which we know is fucking Bizarro.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say I always love Bizarro. I don't always love Bizarro. It depends. But I think it worked well here. What I did like about the comic, I think more so than the movie, is this idea that Lex has been creating this like entire rogues gallery.
Yeah.
You know, we see Parasite or maybe Metallo. I forget exactly everyone we see.
Doomsday.
Oh, yeah.
That led me to another point where Lex beat Doomsday. He can't beat Superman, which makes me believe that, like he said, like a chess game, he knew all this stuff was going to happen. And that's what he meant by checkmate at the end. Come on, dude. They can tame Doomsday and then make him go fight Superman, but they can't beat Superman? Like, that just doesn't track with me. But anyway, good. Sorry.
Yeah. No, and then I was just going to say, I did like that so many of the traditional trappings of the Superman mythology, like the Bottle City, like some of these villains, like the Fortress, we see even, the departure from quote unquote Krypton, you get to see them, which I guess, you could say is a staple of these Elseworld stories generally, but I feel like this one did a particularly good job of sort of weaving in a lot of those things, but in the context of the story, a Batman, Superman face off, like you got a lot of the, if you made a checklist, like some iconic, settings and dynamics and things like that, they were all at play. But the Superman being, or the Superman deterrent, aka Bizarro, being sent after him. I thought it worked.
And I like that the Superman Bizarro in the comic is the one that saves them from the missile, because they still make him from Superman's DNA, which leads back to he's always going to be a good person. Doesn't matter how corrupt he is. Like, you can't corrupt that aspect. I felt really bad for the one in the movie. Like, that was tough to watch. Like, I knew it was a cartoon, but like they keep jacking him up and he starts to sound like Bizarro. Yeah. And then he melts. And then even Lois was like, what the fuck are you doing? He was like, it's just so I can put fear in his eye. Like, I think he said, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. I don't think it was fear. I think it was compassion. Like, I think Lex saw it as fear, but like Superman had a really tough time. Like, he tries to pick him up and he asks him, what's wrong? Like, you just fought each other. And he's like, what's wrong? Like, what are you feeling? Like, I just like both of those. Like, I thought they were both really, really well played in terms of how they would treat each other.
Well, kind of on that note, and maybe this will be a nice, a nice bit to end on. I think in both stories, a scene that really encapsulates, I think, what we've been getting at over the course of now 2 hours about the ultimate core of the character, regardless of who he's raised by or which ideology he subscribes to. When he saves the falling satellite, which is on a collision course with Metropolis, right? This is not his country. These are not his people. Based on the propaganda that America has been putting out there, this is the last thing that the Soviet Superman would do. Yet he's there to help, regardless of ideology, regardless of border. So,
and regardless of if it fell or if it was programmed to fall, because in the book, Lex programmed it to fall.
Right.
In the movie, it just fell, and he still showed up because he wanted to help. So, like I said, either way,
no, I think Lex, but in the movie too, right? He was talking to the president. He's like, permission to drop a satellite, right?
I don't know. I think that was in the book, but now because I watched both of them. But the part that was taken out of the book, I think it was in the book, the little kid with the red balloon.
Yeah.
I like that kid because he's like, so what do you plan on doing? And Superman's like, I want to help people. Like, that in there was like the first time he was like, oh, dude, that's just Superman. Like, that's our Superman, just raised in a different place. Like all the rest of the stories that we had to go through today, which is why I think it was a perfect group. Yeah. Again, well done by you for your choices.
Listen, I appreciate you coming along for this ride, doing all this homework, sharing your take. It was a lot of fun. I always look forward to when we're able to do these. So thank you very much. Thank you, audience. Always appreciate you tuning in. This is the conclusion of our Superman Reimagined event. A pair of very interesting episodes coming up over these next couple of weeks where we sort of look back to some of the beginnings of Superman adaptations. So next week, I'll be joined by Tyler from the Krypton Report podcast. We'll be talking about the Kirk Allen movie serials. And then the week after that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
I already recorded that. And I also recorded the one after that.
I know, I listened to that one.
I'll be joined by Grant from the Truth, Justice, and Hope podcast. We'll be talking about the Clan of the Fiery Cross radio story, as well as the recent Superman Smashes the Klan comic book story that was based on the radio show. So a couple of really interesting episodes coming up. I hope you will tune in for those. As always, it's about what you do. It's about action. The spin-off podcast, Digging for Justice, a DC fan journey, is available now exclusively at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato, starting at the $1 level. New episodes release monthly, and many more rewards are available too, including a robust back catalog of bonus podcasts. Thank you to all patrons for enabling me to produce this show.